There is no doubt that Bryce Young is going to be one of the most impactful players in college football next season, coming off a season where he won the Heisman Trophy. And in today's video, I want to dive into his game and determine, could he even succeed at a higher level? Could he be a future NFL star quarterback? And so in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at his game. I'm going to also include in the description a breakdown, description of the player, that I'm hoping to do for future players also. It includes strengths, weaknesses, player comps, player descriptions, all the charts you'll see in this video, the data that I found. And I'm also going to include the spreadsheet where I mapped out every single play that I watched, which was 243 plays, 6 games worth of Bryce Young, and the result of every play and how I formed the data that I found. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at each section of his game and determine, is he a future NFL star quarterback? And I want to start by looking at where is he throwing the ball and how successful is he in each area of the field. So Bryce Young threw 57% of his passes in the short area, and for all of these stats, I went by how far he physically threw the football. So in the short area, that's under 15 yards, including your RPOs, checkdowns, screens, and he completed over 82.5% of those passes. Very, very impressive. Throwing 31% of his passes in the medium area, completing exactly 50% of those. Those are your 15 to 29 yards area. And then the deep passes he threw, not as often. He completed a little over a third of them. So we'll dive into each of those areas in this video. So let's start by analyzing how he does in the short game, the RPOs, the style of offense that Alabama runs. So his ability in the short game really relates to the title of this video, which is how he does the little things right. He makes so many simple plays that turn out to be big ones. And the first thing I want to highlight with that is his ability to check down the running back. Alabama's had a stable of solid running backs over the past number of years, whether it was Brian Robinson last year. He's going to have Jahmyr Gibbs this upcoming season. He is able to look around and decide, okay, we have some solid playmakers in space. I'm just going to throw it to a running back, and it could turn into a lot. And they specifically did this a lot at Bama, giving the ball to their playmakers. And I think that Young does a really good job of looking around the field and making smart decisions and making the simple plays that have the potential to turn into bigger ones. And whether this be throwing towards the sidelines, like in this example, where he's able to kind of lead the ball into a position where it will allow John Mechie to potentially run a little bit farther. Or looking at a play like this with the RPO, where he's going to recognize that there is a lot of space between his receiver and that defender. It's a simple play over the middle, but it gets the job done. You're almost to a first down already. And then he really started getting good at recognizing off coverage. And Young does a great job of noticing. You'll see him deliberately look to each side of the field, kind of recognize what the defense is giving him and just taking it. He's really solid specifically at looking towards the boundaries. Like on this one, he perfectly positions it to the sideline. Only his guy can catch the ball. It really just comes down to him being aware of the defense. You're going to see, like on this play, he looks twice to the left. He sees we got 3 receivers. There might be a safety trying to cover, and then there's a miscommunication that leaves him wide open. So I really think Young's awareness is one of his best traits. Even on plays like this one where it is super obvious, at least he is aware of his surroundings and he's able to make these smart plays that can potentially turn into big ones. So if you can get him with more surrounding playmakers in the NFL as he did at Alabama, I think he's going to continue to improve in this area, and he'll make the short plays turn into effective ones and not turn the football over. So now we're going to jump to Young in the middle of the field, and as we discussed earlier, his completion percentage did drop to 50%, but I still want to highlight some great skills that he has. He's very successful in a lot of areas in this intermediate part of the field, specifically towards the sidelines. He's been pretty successful. We talked about off coverage in the previous segment, but here you're going to start to see ball placement.
He's really successful at pinning it towards the sidelines, like this one with the double toe tap. That's a catch in the NFL too, of where he positions it. But I want to highlight his back shoulder ball because it is very successful, whether it be here, down at the goal line. I think he might be really good at those fade route, kind of 2-point conversion, go up and get it plays, or this one where it's at the sideline. He twists his receiver around, but that's a ball where only Mechie's going to be able to catch it. And I think that ability to adjust at what is happening on the play is something that's very useful. Back shoulder is always going to come in useful. And this is a great one of kind of leading his receiver to the sideline where only he can get it. And he kind of sees the receiver come open. It's kind of an in and then an out route here, kind of a deep corner to Mechie here. I think that's another great example of just leading guys to where only they can get it. And this is yet another one of him doing the simple things right. He's seeing just a simple in route open that turns into 6, but I think that he surveys the middle of the field really, really well. As you'll see on this next one, he's able to look. You're going to see the safety kind of come up here, covers the flat, and that kind of leaves this seam open that Young is able to recognize right away. There's kind of a miscommunication. You get a double coverage on the check down, and that's going to leave that guy right open. And this ball is just beautiful. In the back of the end zone, threads the needle. You're going to see the double coverage up there up top, and it does not matter. And Young kind of just puts it in a perfect spot for that receiver to score. And I really just think that comes in handy in many, many situations. He can thread the needle in the middle of the field and the sidelines, can make plays all over in the middle of the field. So we'll talk about later why maybe some of those passes, why it was only at 50%. Because if you look at some of these highlight plays, he's great in this area. So I think his sideline is phenomenal, and his ability to read the middle of the field, very, very successful. So now if we take a look at the deep throws, throwing farther than 30 yards, we are going to see, what we talked about earlier in the video, where his completion percentage drops to about once every 3 passes. But I want to start with the highlight plays. Obviously, here you see the play from the intro. Let's first talk about what he does well, which is the ball placement. You can also tell a lot of these reads he knows Jameson Williams is going to hit him with a double move some of the times. Maybe he's just going to burn past somebody. It's pretty clear he's looking there a majority of the way. Like you can kind of see here, he maybe looks underneath, but he's keeping the read downfield, which when you have playmakers, I guess I can understand. And he positions the ball very well. The ball just floats out of his hands. I wrote that in the report specifically. He has a very light touch to it, which a lot of times makes it a very catchable ball. It can lose some air sometimes. But when we look at the poor plays, it really comes down to overthrows. Like this, I think he just gets a little, kind of jumps the gun a little bit, starts to see somebody open, and just sails it a few times here. This is another example here. He finds this guy deep. I mean, this is an open play and a good throw, a little overthrown. This is probably the worst one in my opinion, but he's also on the run. But this is just a sailor, way over. So I think he has a really good touch, but he maybe can get a little jump happy, a little trigger happy here of throwing the football deep. But his sideline touch is phenomenal. I mean, we saw it in the intermediate routes, but in the short routes too. But just his sideline ability to put it in a really good spot, I think we see that at all 3 levels, might be one of his biggest strengths. And that's something that if you can just keep the ball away from defenders, that's really valuable. So I think that Young, yes, he can definitely improve in the deep area. Like he didn't hit all of them. But I do think, and I think he could work on maybe not going straight to the deep ones, a lot of these ones. But when he does, he's got great touch. It kind of just floats out of his hands. Great positioning on a lot of the throws. So although he only completed 33%, the ones he did can be game-changing. And he didn't make that many crazy bad throws that were almost picked when he's throwing deep. So some stuff to work on in the deep area, but I think he's got a lot more skills than many other quarterbacks have at this level to be able to throw that far and successfully. So let's talk about some miscellaneous stats. Just to mention, we'll talk about these areas upcoming here. But he's going to run with the football 7.4% of the snaps that he takes. He was sacked on 4.9%. of the plays. He only turned the ball over 1.2% of plays. So 1 out of like 100 plays. That's really, really impressive. Out of the sample size I found, he only turned it over 3 times. And the kind of throwaway percentage of the passes he does throw away is going to be 7%. Now, his farthest throw, when I went from where his hand was positioned when he threw the football, where his body was, to where the ball landed, in this case was a 61-yard throw, and he was able to complete that, because I think those are two separate things, whether you're just absolutely chucking it out there on a Hail Mary to the back of the end zone, or whether you actually put a really good placement on it. He did on a 61-yard pass. And it came out when I counted some sideways RPOs as just kind of 5-yard plays. Didn't want to count them at 0 because he is physically throwing the football, but you can't exactly calculate how far he is throwing sideways. It came out that he's throwing the ball about 16.35 yards. Kind of discarding throwaways and counting the RPOs is about 5 yards. The screens, I should say, kind of basically. And that's what it came out to. So I'm really interested to see. I can't exactly, as this is the first player I've done these numbers with, tell you how good these stats are compared to others. We're going to find out. I could come back in a few months' time, and he could be the best at all these categories. I think his turnover rate percentage is going to be one of the best. So if I were to pick a stat out of here, to me that's the most important. And then the 61 yards number is also a pretty good number just to keep in mind when we're talking about Bryce Young. So next I want to talk about his improvisation skills. How is he able to perform off platform? As that's what you'll see a lot of times. You're not going to get a perfect game script, and I think that's what makes and separates the elite quarterbacks from just the startable and maybe even good or great ones. So the two best examples of him performing off schedule here is fumbling the snap. It's like it's a low snap. It kind of ends up where he has to get rid of the ball, and he takes the hit and he gets rid of it for a screen, and they gain some yards out of it. I found that really impressive. And this play just vividly reminds me of Mahomes, where he scrambles and just kind of shovels it off to Kelsey. So I just think this ability to evade defenders and also make plays happen off platform, even though they're short plays, will be impressive when he gets to the league. Now let's talk about the turnovers that did occur. There weren't many. There were 3 in this total sample size, but they all happened for different reasons. And this is where improvisation can go wrong. This first one is just a lack of grip, and this was during his freshman season, so he improved on that clearly in his sophomore year, but just kind of a lack of grip on the football, and it seemed to improve that. This one is just kind of poor placement. It's really, you can watch his eyes. He's keeping his eyes on that the whole time, that crosser, and it kind of cost him. This one I want to highlight, though. This is probably the biggest concern I have for if he is going to turn the ball over, is we talked about the overthrows on the deep ones earlier, just getting a little trigger happy, and we see that here. You can see the receiver that he was intending on that crossing route, and it just goes over his head. And honestly, I think it's his ability. It's weird. He can really throw the ball pretty fast. You also will see the floater happen, and I think unfortunately both could cause some kind of wacky interceptions, but he overall kept them to a minimum, and that's impressive. So I don't think turnovers will be a big concern when he gets to the league, but those are few causes that could potentially happen. Okay, so this might get into the nitpicking side of analysis here, but the one weakness I saw that kind of stood out to me was his anticipation, or kind of his lack of anticipation. You saw in every game kind of a lack of throwing where the receiver is going to be and throwing it behind a majority of the time, which is what you're going to see with anticipation issues, where he's kind of just throwing to the general spot, but not kind of putting the ball where that receiver is going to be. And so a lot of these balls might even be catchable, but they really would have been caught if they were put more where the receiver is going to be, more so on their chest. You're going to see a lot of these receivers have to kind of reach out unnecessarily. This one's kind of wacky, but it's just in the middle. But you're just going to see kind of some of these balls could have been caught if they were placed a little bit better. They had so many yak touchdowns, and they could have had even more if you had a few better throws. So I don't think it's a glaring issue, but it was something that, if you're watching, it didn't distract you from the tape, but it definitely was the biggest issue I saw with his tape. So the last skill of his I really want to touch on, which can be viewed as an X factor, it's kind of a bonus for a lot of quarterbacks, and that's his mobility. So big reason why I have the comp right now for him as Russell Wilson. And I think these first two plays perfectly capture his top three skills, which is his mobility, his overall awareness, and his willingness just to take what the defense gives him. As you're going to see, he's going to move around, and he just checks it down because he has a threat with his legs where the defense is eventually going to bite. And when they do, he's aware to throw sideways. He knows where he is on the field, where the line of scrimmage is, and at what point he's able to make magic happen. So here you're going to see him look all around, shift throughout the pocket, eventually step up here, and once that defender leaves the assignment because he thinks the play is over, no, Young is willing to throw it sideways. And this is a great example of I also want to combine just his overall ability to escape sacks. And I will say there were some unnecessary sacks in tape when he'd do stuff like this, and he thinks he can escape everybody. But there weren't many, game-ending drive kind of poor sacks, I'd say, that he took. Like, he took some bad ones, but he avoided so many such as this, and he pairs it with his ability to check down. I mean, he can straight up run also. His step-up move is very good. And he was really good at combining, like on plays like this, he's willing to go all out to score, but he also is very aware he slid a lot of the times. And that's kind of a natural instinct, which to me is great. You need him to stay safe, stay healthy. So I think his overall awareness of trying to score and also keeping himself safe was really, really good throughout. So his mobility is kind of this extra factor that could raise him above a lot of other quarterbacks, as it's kind of just an X factor in his game that he can do all of these great things throwing the football, and he can also move around. He's not a running quarterback. He's a quarterback that can run, which is the way I'd want it to be. It's kind of an extra skill. Like, okay, I can hang in the pocket here, make some players miss, and keep myself safe. So that's exactly what you want if you're going to have a mobile quarterback, is just to take care of themselves and also make some plays happen. In conclusion, Bryce Young is a very talented quarterback with a lot of baseline skills that are easily going to translate to the NFL. Whether that be his awareness, his sideline passing ability, his mobility, his ability to not turn the ball over, offers a lot of upside. He isn't a perfect prospect, lacking some anticipation, but he put up a very solid performance so far in his college career, and I'm very excited to see what he will do in his junior season at Alabama. So in a year from now, almost, we could be looking at him as a top 5 draft pick. I'm Riley's Red Zone, and I'll see you in the next video.